I'm going to pass out some paper. Oh, that's not it. Where'd it go? Here it is. Is JFK larger than LAX by area of land? No, LAX is bigger. You can pass both of those back behind you. Pass both of those back behind you. Pass both of those back behind you. Am I going to rent a jet? No, I can't afford that. No, I'm not going to rent a jet. Besides, nobody rents jets. You can't just say, hey, I'm a jet pilot, I want to rent your jet. Nobody will rent it to you. About the biggest airplane anybody will rent you is about a 6-seater that'll go about 150 or 200 miles an hour. At least back in the day when I was renting airplanes, I remember I rented a T-tail Lance. It was turbocharged. I was going to fly from Fresno to Mammoth on the other side of Sierra Nevada to go skiing. And it had 6 seats, and it had room in between the seats that you could put skis in there. I had it all lined up and got up the next morning at 5 o'clock, called up and got the weather, and they had closed the runway at the Mammoth Airport due to ice. So I had to call all my other, I think there were 4 or 5 people of us total going, and we had to cancel the flight. I was bummed because the week before that I got checked out in the airplane for insurance purposes, and I spent like $100, which these days that's about like $300. So, oh well. But I flew a T-tailed Lance once. But it was a 6-seat airplane. It was turbocharged. It'd go about 180 miles. It'd go about 170 knots. So it was coming close to 200 miles an hour. And that's about the biggest airplane you can rent. To just say, hey, I'm a pilot. I want to rent your plane. But about what? My connections? The connections don't matter. It's whether or not a company will insure you. So if you have a big 10-seat jet, in order to rent it out, they'd probably charge you $500,000 a year. So you'd have to charge, and you wouldn't rent it that much, so you'd have to charge people like $10,000 an hour. And it'd be cheaper to just charter it for $8,000 an hour. So if you want a 10-seat jet, you just charter it. And then you walk up and say, hey, can I stand here and watch while you two fly the airplane? They'll go, sure. Or if it's a small enough jet that it only has one pilot, they'll let you sit in the co-pilot seat. Yeah, that's nice. But whether it lets you touch the controls, I wouldn't have. If I was them, I'd say, no, sorry. As soon as you touch the controls, then my insurance is void. And then if we crash, my boss will be unhappy. So we're a new section today. It's section 4B. We're going to talk about airports a lot today. You ought to have 2 pieces of paper in front of you. There's printing on all 4 sides. And I would recommend that you just stuff this in with the rest of your notes. I noticed on the last quiz, which was yesterday, that a lot of people spent a lot of time shuffling around. Come on in, Mr. Ritchie. A lot of people spend a lot of time shuffling their notes and stuff around. I cannot more highly recommend that you figure out a way to put all your note pages together so it's easy to get to. Like get a binder or something, or tape them into your stuff if you want. Can I help you look for anything? No, there was not a pneumatic hand drill in here. There was a $100 bill, but I already spent it. I don't think he believed me that I had a $100 bill. Okay, let's talk about these 2 kinds of airports, controlled airports and uncontrolled airports. A controlled airport means that there is an operating control tower on the airport, and there is an air traffic controller, or 2 or 3, in the tower. So therefore means that you have to call them up before you get there. They have defined spaces around it, which we're going to get to probably in the next 2. And most airports is like 3 miles in radius or 5-mile radius around where the center of the airport is. And you're not allowed to fly into it until you call up the air traffic controller and they at least say your N number. The N number is the registration number that's painted on the side of the airplane. It's like your license plate number. And that's how you are identified in the air. You call yourself that number, like 7912 X-ray. And they'll call you back, and they'll call you 7912 X-ray. So if you call up the control tower and they say your N number, then that effectively means it's okay to keep going straight and enter their airspace. But usually what they'll say 7912 X-ray, straight in for runway 29 or left, report 4 to 3 miles out, squawk 0505, maintain at or below 2,000 feet or something like that. Okay. An uncontrolled airport means that when you're going there, there's no tower that's operating. For instance, you might go to the Fresno Air Terminal, and if they shut the tower down at 10 o'clock at night, and they don't open it until 6 a.m., That means for that 8 hours, from 10 at night to 6 a.m. the next morning, it is an uncontrolled airport. And you don't have to talk to the tower anymore. Now, there are some airports that there's somebody in their traffic control tower 24 hours a day, like Los Angeles International or San Francisco International or Sacramento. Maybe Sacramento. They do a lot of flying out of Sacramento Airport. I haven't looked it up. So if there's a control tower that's not in operation, or there's never a tower there, like Selma Airport or Reedley Airport, then it's an uncontrolled airport, and now you don't have to get anybody's permission to fly in there. But if you have a radio, it's a whole lot safer if you announce where you are and what you're going to do on the CTAF. Remember, CTAF, on another page that I'm sure you wrote down, is Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. Common means the fact that everybody that's going in and out of that airport is going to talk on it. And it's advisory because you're just what you're going to do. You're not getting permission from anybody. Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. Like at Reedley Airport, it's 122.7. Like FM radio goes all the way up to 108 megahertz or 107.9. Well, a little bit above that is some navigation frequencies for airplanes, and a little above that is communication frequencies. So 122.7 is what it is for Reedley Airport. And it's probably different for Selma. There's 2 or 3 or 4 of these frequencies, and the problem is there's only a few. So if you're at like 2,000 feet above Reedley at 122.7, you're probably going to hear traffic at airports, which is why you always say the name of the airport you're flying into or flying out of, so that people won't confuse the fact about whether you're at Reedley or you're at Hanford or something like that. All right. I want to talk about how the runways are laid out, or how do they name or number the runways. When that runway gets built, they're going to line up, they're going to go out there with a magnetic compass and look at it and say, which compass heading is it close to? Well, magnetic compass has 360 degrees in it, but you'll notice the runway at Reedley, if you turn onto one of those pieces of paper on there, one of those sides has the Reedley International Airport on it. I know it's really, really small. I made it small. But you'll notice one of the runways is runway 33 and runway 15. So if you got your airplane lined up on that runway, runway 33, your compass would read approximately 33. Your compass would effectively be reading something close to 330. So effectively, then the name of the runway or the number of the runway is what your compass would read if you're coming in to land on it or you're taking off from it. Paint the first 2 digits, 330. They'll paint those first 2 digits on the runway, 33. If you pull out the one that has Fresno Yosemite International Airport, and it's that one that's got 2 big runways, and it says airport diagram at the top, and it says Fresno Yosemite International FD, you notice there's 2 runways, or you could say there's 2 pieces of asphalt, but each asphalt is actually 2 runways. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll notice that there's runway 11 left, and there's runway 11 right. So if you were taken off of that airport on one of those 2 runways, your compass would say something very close to 110. It's just even on your compass, they don't put that last 0 on there. And you notice one is on the left and one is on the right. If you were landing in the opposite direction, if you look at the other end of those 2 runways, you'll notice one is labeled 29er left and the other is now labeled 29er right. And the prevailing winds in Fresno are such that usually you take off and land on runway 29er left and 29er right. They usually put the big jets on, and they're fast airplanes, and they put the slower airplanes, which are typically the little airplanes, they put them on the runway that's on the left, just so it's easy for them to control. They got all the fast airplanes on one runway, they got all the slow airplanes on the other. And in fact, if you had 3 runways, it could be 29 left, 29C for the center, and 29 center and 29 right. But there's not that many airports that have more than 2 runways, unless you want to go to San Francisco International, or Los Angeles International, or Dallas Love Field, or JFK, stuff like that. Those airports may have 3 runways that are all lined up with each other. So just for fun, while we're looking at these runways, let's find the one for Fresno Chandler. I think it's on the back of the Fresno Yosemite. Fresno Chandler used to have a tower. It also used to have 2 runways, but they X'd one of them out. This one doesn't have a tower, but you'll notice there's runway 30 and there's runway 12. Flying into this airport, you would try to find, you would either do one of 2 things to figure out which runway to, you could do 3 things. Is number 1, you could overfly the airport and look down at the airport wind sock to see which way the wind is blowing. Or you could listen to the frequency 10 or 20 minutes out and see what other airplanes are taking off and landing on, and you're just going to enter the traffic pattern the way they are. Sometimes there's somebody on the ground you could call up and ask them. Yeah, question, Brian? It does matter which way you land. In fact, I'm glad you asked that, because what you want to try to do 99.99% of the time is take off with the wind in your face, and you want to land with the wind in your face. Or the way we usually say it is you take off into the wind and you land into the wind. So let's just say for fun we're at Chandler, and we're going to take off at Chandler Airport there, Fresno Chandler Executive Airport. And the wind is coming from, if it's coming from the northwest, it's going down the runway, kind of from the end of runway 12, going towards the 30. So if we lined up to take off on runway 30, we would be pointing the airplane into the wind. And if we didn't have a windshield and a propeller, the wind would be hitting. So we'd be taking off into the wind. And if you were here on Friday, or rather in Fresno on Friday, we talked about a 20-knot headwind. So let's say the wind's going 20 knots and the wind is coming out of 300. So this chart here, you'll notice at the top center of the chart, arrow that's true north, and then there's a magnetic line that says variation 13.1 east. So let's all pretend we're sitting in the airplane and we're lined up on runway 30. So we'd actually have to turn to the left a little bit because that's 60 degrees off. So if we're lined up in the airplane and we're heading a magnetic heading of 300, if the wind is blowing straight at us, that means the wind is coming from 300. So if somebody says the wind is 300, that means it's really easy. I'm going to land on runway 30. But even if the wind is off by 10 degrees, if somebody says the wind is 290 or somebody says the wind is 310, it's still pretty much coming down the runway, and I'm still going to take off and land on runway 30. So if there's an automatic transmitter that's measuring the wind, and you can listen to that when you're 20 miles away, you're going to do that. And I bet you there is one for Fresno, because there's one for Piddly Little Reedley International. So I'm guessing that there's one for Fresno Chandler. So you can listen on the radio to see what other airplanes are doing. You can listen to the separate weather frequency. You can overfly the airport and look down and see which way the wind is blowing. So there's at least 3 ways, or sometimes there's people on the ground you can call and ask them, even though it's not a tower. For instance, the CTAF is commonly also a Unicom, and there may be a business at the airport, and they got somebody at the front desk listening to that frequency. And you could say, Fresno Chandler Unicom, what's the active runway? And somebody, oh, this is Fred, and everybody's taking off landing on runway 30, I think. Is that what you want? Huh? Oh. Yes, thank you very much, Fresno Unicom. Okay, see you later. Bye. In any case, I'm sure they're much more professional than that. And so you would come into the airport knowing what runway you're going to land. Same thing if you're on the ground at Reedley Airport, there's 2 ways to figure out which way the wind is blowing. One is a windsock, and the other is the automated weather, and it tells you what direction the wind is blowing. So then you would taxi out to the runway that you wanted to take off from. Now, while we're at it, we're still looking at Chandler here. You'll notice that there's information on this airport diagram. You'll notice that it has the exact magnetic heading of the runways, 112.6, and the other runway is 292.6. So you notice it's not exactly 300 or 120. It's off about. And they know which variation is moving, but they're not going to repaint this every 2 or 3 years and change it from runway 30 to runway 31. They're going to leave it for a long time. So it may be off as much as 10 degrees from your real magnetic heading. Okay, big deal. Also, you notice by that black chunk there, it has the runway length, and the width is 3,627 feet long, and it's 75 feet wide. So if I'm going to land a business jet, this is going to be a problem for me, because most business jets, unless you're very lightly loaded, a 3,600-foot runway may not be enough length of a runway. Of course, a Piper Tomahawk PA-28, you can probably take it off and land it under 1,000 feet pretty easy. So with dinky airplanes, you don't worry about it too much. Let's see, you notice they also show you that the taxiways or have letters. There's Taxiway Hotel, which parallels the runway to the north. There's Taxiway Alpha. Sorry, I'm spitting here. Taxiway Alpha, which parallels the runway to the south. And you can see there's Taxiway F, Echo, Foxtrot, Delta, Charlie, and Bravo. You notice they also show you where most of the buildings are. About in the middle of the airport, there's a 352 and a little star. That's the airport beacon. They run that beacon under two circumstances. They run that beacon at night, and they also run the beacon if the weather is less than VFR. Weather is less than 3 or feeling, they're going to turn this beacon. Let's see, what else do we got? Oh, also, if you look at each of those, no, that's not it. Yeah, that's enough there. If we flip this page over and look at the Fresno Yosemite, there's a gazillion more little things on there, which we're not going to go into at the moment. But you'll notice if you want to know what exact heading the runway is on, exactly look at those two runways. One's 9,500 feet long, one's 8,000 feet long. And look, they're both 150 feet wide. When I learned how to fly it, it didn't even, well, it had a number, but it wasn't painted, and there were lines painted on it. It was about 30 or 40 feet wide. So a little bit more than the wingspan of the airplane. So you learn not to be too far left and not to be too far right. So that's the downside. You learn to fly out at a run that's got 150 feet, and then you land at something that's 75. That's when you take flying lessons. You land on the dotted lines in the middle of the runway, and don't get to land 5 or 10 feet in either direction. You can find the beacon. You'll notice on this airport it says the tower is 445 feet. The rotating beacon at this airport is actually on top of the air traffic control tower. Ta-da! And that's all I'm worried about right now. Okay. Question, Mr. Flores. Runway 29 right, there's little two oval things. That means that the landing is displaced. You're not supposed to land until you get to that point. So if you were landing on the runway, there's other runway markings, which we're not going to go into at the moment, that would say don't land here. It would be arrows. That's what it would be. If you looked on that runway right there, that first 100 feet or 300 feet, there'd be arrows. So if you're coming into landing and you see the arrows, that means go a little bit further before you touch down. It's because the runway there isn't strong enough for big old giant airplanes to hit the runway really, really hard. But it's still technically illegal for anybody to land there. All right, I think that's enough about runway layouts. So we effectively just covered what's on this slide then. This little airplane right here. If it's going to land on runway 33, coincidentally, runway 3315 is what there is at Reedley Airport. And so if you were inside of this airplane, your compass would read approximately 330. Approximately. All right. So I don't like that pattern. Uh-oh. Is this the wrong version? I think I saved the wrong version. Tell me I didn't. Tell me I saved. Shucks. All right. Yep, I saved the wrong version. Okay, well then there's something else I want to show you today. So there's a lot of different places where you can get information about airports. One of them is called the Airport Facility Directory. It's about $5. It's like a little book, and it covers California, Nevada, Arizona, It covers about the 5 Southwest states. And then it expires something like every 56 days. You got to buy another one. Or what you can do is you can go online and look at places. Or what you can do is do what I do. And I have this computer program called 4Flight, and it runs on iPads. And I'm not trying to make you buy 4Flight. There's about 10 computer programs out there that you can either put on iPads or on laptops or on PC-based tablets. I happen to have 4Flight because that's the kind we used at the job I used to have. So literally, 4Flight will let you log on. Not can you just run this program on your iPad. You can run some parts of it on a desktop computer. So that's what I've done here. I've gone to 4flight.com and I logged in as not being a hose bag, and I've told it to show me data that includes what a chart looks like. And we've all looked at this chart in this class before, and here's Readly International over here. The thing I like about it is when I go over something, I get a little hand, and if I click it once, Oscar 32, Readly Municipal, I can add it to my route if I want to. And now if I want to, let's say I want to fly to Selma International, I can click it and I can add it to my route. Cool. And here it tells me, and I set up an airplane as an Alpha Electro. It says it'll take 11 nautical miles to get from Readly to Selma Airport. In any case, I'm going to go back here to Readly, and I can look at these frequency. The AWOS right here, that's the automatic weather observation system. And in the airplane, I can crank in this frequency, 120.175, and I can listen to this on the ground to see how high are the clouds, what's the wind doing, and it'll tell me some precipitation, whether it's raining or snowing. I can also listen to this in the air as I'm getting closer to Readly. About 10 or 15 minutes out, you can tune this in, and that way if it says the wind is 300 at 10 knots, 300 is really close to 330, so that means I'm going to land on runway 33. And look, there's the CTAF, the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. You notice it also says Unicom. That CTAF is the frequency that you use to talk to the other airplanes and announce where you are and what you're going to do. The Unicom is typically, there's a business down there that someone might be listening on that frequency, and you can talk to them and say, hey, do you have a Coca-Cola machine there? Or can you call a taxi and have it waiting for me? In this case, you'll notice it's the same frequency. Other frequencies, the nearest flight service station. Flight service are the meteorologists that are trained in briefing pilots what the weather is like. Most of them are pilots as well, but they've had a lot of training in meteorology. And you can call them up in the air near Readly, and there's the frequency for it, 122.55. So one of the reasons I like this computer program is I can access all of this data on my iPad, and I bought a mount, so it actually mounts to the control wheel. So it's literally sitting there in front of me, and I can just tap, 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 and pow. I got all the frequencies I want. And you'll notice, look at this, here's flight service, but it's at 255.4 megahertz. Why would they give me two frequencies for the same darn thing? It's okay if you don't know this. It's not intuitive. Jonathan? Nope. Good call. But the airlines use the same frequencies as little airplanes. Question? Military. Yeah, that's right. The little airplanes and civil airplanes use VHF, very high frequency. Like we talk somewhere around, the 116 to 132 or something like that. But the military is about double that, approximately. So yeah, if you were in a military aircraft, you could talk to flight service on 255.4. Jonathan? I have no idea what CB radio frequencies are. Yeah, it's megahertz. Kilohertz? I don't know. So here's more data about the runway. In particular, there's runway 15 and 33. Of course, we already know that. Look at that. It says it's 3,300 feet long, and it's 60 feet wide. It's asphalt, and it's in fair condition, so maybe there's not too many holes in it. And it gives us an approximate, what does it look like, runway 33 and runway 15. And look, it says procedures. Well, let's just see. Airport procedures. and it gives me the airport diagram, which I printed for you. So it has the approximate, it has, let's see, the thing I don't like about it is this is not showing where the beacon is. And this is not the FAA's printing. But you'll notice it shows runway 33, runway 15, it shows the length and the width, it shows where the hangars are, it shows the names of the taxiways. This big building right here, that's the main hangar. There's a mechanic that has a shop there. The restroom, it doesn't show it, but the restroom is in this little building. I've been there before. This little building right here is where the gas pumps are. And you know, well, it's always good to know where the restroom is. And then you can see the variation is 13 degrees east. All right. Not at that airport. Not if you can drink water, but not if it got pumped out of the ground there. So let's see, what type of a thing is it? It's an airport. If you were looking at what sectional chart, the ones we looked at in class, the name of that chart is the San Francisco sectional. So if you wanted to go buy a chart that had all of this on it, that's it. If you wanted to talk to an air traffic control center, you'd be talking to Oakland Center. And we already talked about flight service. The time zone, it's in Pacific Daylight Savings Time. So when is Pacific Daylight Savings Time over? It's in November, early November? Okay. Is it an airport of entry? Can you get customs here? No. So if you fly in from Mexico, you can't land here and have customs come and inspect you. You can at Fresno. Can you look at this in Google Maps? Oh my goodness. I can look at this in Google Maps. I love technology. So here's Google Maps. And if we zoom out a little tiny bit, here's Reedley College down here. You go out on Reed, go across, and then where'd the airport go? There it is. You can also see, it's hard to tell, but here's Campbell Mountain. And oh wait, I love this part. Let's go to the satellite picture. So if I wanted to study this airport before I got there to make sure I could recognize it, oh, okay, look, 4 of these hangars are painted, the roof is white, but the runway is not very dark black. This is an old runway, so it's not going to stand out. Look at the color of this gray runway versus the color of this field right here. Now, granted, who knows when this picture could be 2 or 3 years old, so we don't know what these fields look like at the moment. But this runway may not stick out too well in any case. I can also tell and say, here's Campbell Mountain. You can actually see the R and see the S. And here's Watoki Lake over here. I've seen Watoki Lake. And so if I zoom out a little more, look, here's the Kings River over here. And if I can find Reedley, here's Reedley. If I can find Reedley, it's just due north off of Reedley. And the Valentinos lived right there, and they did not like airport noise, and they had a home near the airport. But I'm digressing. So let's go back to ForeFlight. So I can study it that way if I wanted. And it even tells me when the next sunrise is at this airport at 7:15 and the next sunset. And that's important to know. When do I need to turn on my lights on the airplanes, the external lights? And if I'm a pilot, I not only have to have 3 takeoffs and landings in the last 90 days if I want to have passengers, but if I want to fly at night, I have to have 3 takeoffs and landings to a full stop at night in the last 90 days. And here's what's interesting. You can go an hour past the sunset and you still don't, and it's still not considered night. Night is exactly 1 hour after sunset. So if I look at that and I go, I can go out there, let's say I haven't flown at night for more than 90 days. So I do not have 3 takeoffs and landings at night to a full stop in the last 90 days. I can go out there and I can take off at 7:20 with passengers and fly around, and as long as I land by before 8:15, I wasn't flying at night. What's weird, I got to turn on my night lights, my external lights, at 7:15. It's not night when it comes to whether I've had to take off and landing or at night, and I can't log this hour as nighttime either. What I'd have to do at 8:15 is kick the passengers out, get back in the airplane, and do 3 takeoffs and landings to a stop. At night, after 8:15, night doesn't count to log it as nighttime unless it's an hour after sunset, and it has to be done no more than, it's not night when you get to an hour before takeoff, an hour before sunrise. because now it's twilight. Twilight, the FAA doesn't consider night, except that you got to have your external position lights on at night, during twilight. There, am I confusing you? But this is great. Now I don't have to look this up. It just means I better land by 8:15, or I better go if I have passengers. If I don't have passengers, then I can land at night, even if I haven't landed at night for 10 years, as long as I'm by myself. It also tells you what kind of jet fuel and avgas. 100 low lead, that's 100 octane. With low lead, that's less lead than it used to be in there, and that's what little piston-powered airplanes use. Jonathan? No, it's against federal and state law to run leaded fuel in a vehicle that is being used for on-road use. If you use it on a public road in the United States, you can't use leaded fuel in it. I didn't say it wasn't possible to do it. I said you're violating federal and state laws. So you could get a 1967 Chevy Impala, with all your electric, hydraulically powered low-riding equipment, and that engine was designed to run on leaded fuel. So if you poured 100 low lead in it, the engine would be fine. Woohoo! But as soon as you drive it off of the fairgrounds and onto the street, you've just violated federal law and California state law by running leaded gasoline in a vehicle on a public road. Yeah. They wouldn't find out very likely unless your friend squealed to the police, and then the police thought that they had a way to prove it. But how would they prove it in court? The Fifth Amendment, anybody ever heard of the Constitution of the United States? How many amendments are there to the Constitution? 27? But one of them, there's two of them, there's at least one that one had prohibition, one repealed it, right? Okay, so then there's 25 active ones. But the Fifth Amendment, it gives citizens the right to not have to self-incriminate. You watch those old gangster movies from the 50s and 60s, and they say, I plead the Fifth. If they ask you a question, and if the answer would be confessing to a crime, you don't have to answer. It's against federal law to torture U.S. citizens. Well, if you're outside of the United States and you're not a U.S. citizen, there is no U.S. law that protects you. So you can read into that any way I think I've said that before. Yeah, think about waterboarding in Guantanamo Bay against people who are not U.S. citizens, and that's not U.S. country. It's nobody's country. I don't know, Cuba would say it's theirs, but they don't fight us over it because we got a lot of guns and bullets and rockets and stuff. All right, so back to here. So you can get 100 low lead there. You can also get jet fuel. Jet A is what most jets use. All right. So is there anybody to contact? No. Other services just for fun. What's that? Charter service and aircraft rental, but these aren't hot links, so you can't get charter service, and there's nobody out there to rent from. And let's see, operating hours. I think these are the operating hours of the maintenance shop, but I couldn't swear to that. And are there scheduled arrivals? No, not at Reedley Airport. Are there any airlines going in? No. And this says this information is valid through November 9th. Now look at this. This is one of the reasons why I like computer programs. I can hit the METAR, and that METAR is weather usually within the last hour, but they usually don't have this at every single airport. So it'll just show you the METAR for the nearest airport that has it. In this case, it says KFAT. K is the prefix for airports in the United States. If somebody in another country wants to know, they could type in airports in the world and type in KFAT, and they'd get Fresno Yosemite. In any case, you can see what the weather is in Fresno Yosemite. And you notice it says 71 minutes ago, so it's probably going to get updated here really, really soon. You can also look at the forecast, but the forecast is for Fresno. It used to be called Fresno Air Terminal, that's why it's FAT. So you can look at what the forecast is likely to be, and I can look at what the winds are. So somewhere near Reedley Airport, but not exactly, here are the winds. At 3,000 feet, the wind is 233 at 5 knots. And watch out, because these altitudes are above mean sea level, not above ground level. And then FBOs. FBO is fixed base operator. FBO stands for fixed base operator. At Reedley Airport, they're given us two names and phone numbers. B. Smith Air, Carl Smith. I don't know why it says B. Smith, but everybody calls him Carl. I never asked him to see his birth certificate. He's a mechanic, and he'll work on your airplane out there. And look, there's his phone number. And he also has the price, because he's the one that runs the jet fuel and the aviation gasoline pump. And then they also, since Reedley owns the airport, the city of Reedley owns that property, they've got a phone number for the city of Reedley. And you can call them up and say, yo, I want to talk to the airport manager. And they're going to go, okay? All right, don't laugh at that. See if I care. So I'm just really fast. So let's see. And all right, let's clock cancel. If I picked Fresno Airport, so I click on it once, and it ought to give me a list. Hopefully, it'll give me a list of all the things nearby. Oh, sorry, I got to push on the airport. So, wow, it's telling me a list of a bunch of things here, and it's telling me that there's a TFR. TFR stands for temporary flight restriction. And temporary flight restrictions are ones that are not, it's temporary, so they don't put it on charts. They don't put it on maps. But pilots have to look these things up. And here's the good news. When you call up the flight service station to get the weather, all you have to do is say, are there any TFRs? Now, they're supposed to tell you if there's any near your route of flight. So we're not going to get into this, but there's a TFR over the stadium October 28th at 6 p.m. at night until October 29th until 1 a.m. in the morning. So they don't want flights flying over the Fresno State game for this 7-hour period. Question? Temporary flight restriction. It's just that some of them are less temporary than others. Like the one over Disneyland is a non-temporary, temporary flight restriction. So there's all the stuff. You don't have to read all that. But effectively, requests for, here's what would end up happening. You'll notice this line actually goes through the runways. If you were talking to the tower, you'd be fine. Of course, what I'd call them up, if I was flying in there, I'd say, hey, can I fly through the TFR because I'm talking to you? And they're going to say yes. But what if I wanted to take off and fly over the stadium? They'd probably say no. They'd say no, go northeast or go southwest, but they'd say don't go over that way. And usually TFRs are 3 miles in a radius of 3 miles. Remember, this long runway here is 9,000 feet, so that's almost 2 statute miles. That's about a mile and a half. A mile and a half nautical miles. All right, I'm wondering if there's, just for fun, we'll look at Selma. So let's look at Selma. Oops. So look, their CTAP is 122.8. But look, their flight service station is the same outfit. They have runway 1028. It's only 2,206 feet long. Look, it's got traffic pattern of 1,000 and 1,105. Let's see, did Reedley have the traffic pattern? Did I just miss it? Did I miss the traffic pattern at Reedley International? Does it not say that? Did I miss it? Wow. I'll be dogged. Oh, here we go. Nope. It doesn't have the traffic pattern altitude. Oh. Well, here it says right traffic. But why does it not say... Oh, I know what it is. It's because if the traffic pattern altitude is 1,000 feet above the airport elevation, then they don't list it. So if the airport elevation is 380, that means air traffic pattern altitude is 1,380. But then here we go to Selma. Here we go to Selma. And see if I can move it. It doesn't want to let me move it. Selma, how high is Selma Airport? Let's see if we can find how high. Here it is. There it is. Selma is 305 feet, but now traffic pattern's not 1305, it's 1105. They've got you down by 200 feet, so you're only going to end up flying 800 feet above the ground. So that's why Selma lists it, is because it's not a standard 1,000 feet. Anybody got any idea why would somebody want you to fly the traffic pattern 200 feet lower? No, if you're flying lower, then that's bad, right? I'm surprised. I would have thought it would have been the other way. I think it has something to do with instrument flying going into the Fresno airport is what I think it is. I think they're trying to keep some kind of altitude separation, and probably one of the instrument routes is near the Selma airport, so they're trying to keep the airplanes 200 feet lower just to keep more clearance. But that's my guess. Mr. Flores. There are specific routes that you can file, that you can make up your own routes. Like you see this blue line right here, it says Victor 165. That's an IFR route right there. Hey, wait, let's look at this. Oh wait, Victor 23. Hey, it goes right over Selma Airport. Maybe that's why. So what I want to do now is I want to look up, see if I can get an instrument. There we go. So here's an instrument chart, which VFR pilots pretty much never look at. And so there's Selma Airport right underneath this Victor Airway, Victor 23. It's hard to see, but there's Victor 23. You see this 2,000 feet? At 2,000 feet, that's the lowest altitude you can fly on this route and still be able to pick up your navigation radios and still stay above 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle, because you're coming up on Fresno, right? So you're going to hit some obstacles up here in Fresno. So this 2,000 feet, if they had, now this is MSL on your altimeter. So are you really 2,000 feet above the ground? No, we just found out Selma Airport is 305 feet. So this is only going to be about 1,695 feet above the ground here. If this traffic pattern was at 1305, look at that. You'd be less than 1,000 feet above this. I mean, below it. So that's now my guess, is they're having you fly this traffic pattern lower. So if there's an IFR airplane flying along here at 2,000, you're at 1105. You've got almost 900 feet below them. That's my guess. Okay, I think that's enough for one day.